go ahead and get started. This is the March 19th, 2024 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals. Zoning present here today. We have Hal present here today. We have Hal Morrison, Robin Richards, John Bennett, Bill Goodwin Jr., Chappie McKay, and me, your chair, Jeff Tibbles, present from the zoning staff, Lee Batchelder, Emma McQuarrie, and Allison Craig. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak, please identify yourself for the record. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The Board of Zoning Appeals usually, but not always, approves uncontested applications. For all applications, the board reserves the right to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application, or if there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. I'm required by our city zoning ordinance to ask you to swear in if you intend to speak this evening. So if you do intend to speak, please hold your right hand up. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'll signify by saying I do. Thank you. All right, we have no deferrals on the agenda tonight, so we'll get straight into the meeting agenda. The agenda, first item on the agenda, section A, review of minutes and deferred applications from previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. Number one, review of minutes of the March 5th, 2024 meeting. The package of meeting minutes is in the packet that's been distributed. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, Mr. McCain moves to approve.
Second.
All right, Mr. Bennett seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. Mr. Goodwin has abstained because he was not here. Ms. Richards was not here either, but we still have a quorum and the minutes are approved. The second item on our agenda, A2, 60 Spring Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, Council District Number 4, PMS number 460-08-02-034, Zone GB, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a detached single-family residence with a front setback of 64.3 feet and a total side setback of 12.5 feet. 80 feet and 15 feet are required. The owner applicant is 60 Unlimited Ideas, LLC, Monty Brown. Mr. Batchelder.
This application concerns a property on Spring Street in the Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood. It's located mid-block between St. Philip and Cumming Street, and was presented to the board 2 weeks ago. And at that meeting, there was some discussion about a impact of the plan on this property, on the adjacent neighbor at 58 Spring, the neighbor to the west or east of this property. And so the application was deferred to allow the applicant to go back and look at revising their plan and maybe trying to work something out with the neighbor next door. So there is a revision to the plan, and that's what I'll present. So this is the property. You can see there's a home up front on Spring Street, and then a home at the very back of the property. The application materials that were filed, plans for the new building. Again, the survey shows the existing buildings at the front and the back of the lot. And this survey, this blown up portion, shows the part of the shed on the neighbor's property that encroaches onto 60 Spring Street, according to this survey. And this is just an overall plan showing the proposed building. That's the light gray rectangle. Here's a blow up of that. You can see the setback 64 feet 4 inches from the front property line. The zoning ordinance requires a front setback for additional dwelling units of 80 feet in this zoning district. And then the side setbacks 3 feet 7 on the east side and 9.6. Both of these numbers satisfy the minimum setback requirements on the east side and the west side, but the combined total of these two setbacks is supposed to equal 15, and this is only 13 feet. So the revision to the plan to attempt to address the issue from the neighboring property owner is to slide that proposed building back 12 feet and shift one of the parking spaces from behind the building to in front of the building, the proposed building. So that's what this plan reflects. And here's a close-up view. And the lot itself gets a little bit narrower as you go further back in the lot. So I think the actual total side setback with the reduction or with the shift of that building further back is going to be about a 6-inch decrease of the total side setback. So 3 feet is the minimum east side setback. And then this shows 9.6 on the west side. You need to get a car by there, so it could be a little less than 9.6, and the 3 foot east side setback could increase a little bit, but the net result is that it's going to be 12.5 feet versus 13 feet. So that's actually reflected on the agenda. That's a slight change to the variance request. It's still essentially the same. But the other change, of course, is that the variance to the front setback requirement for this new residential building is decreased because the distance is increased from 64.3 feet to 76.3 feet. So 12 feet further back. So it's almost at the 80-foot requirement. And what that does is that allows, so this was the parking plan before, 2 cars in front, 3 cars behind. And so what that does is it allows for 3 cars to be between the front building and the new building. And then 2 spaces would be behind that building. And those 2 spaces are shown here. And this image of the car, of the vehicle turning into the space is actually not in the correct location. It should be a little bit over because this highlighted line is the dashed line that is supposed to be the outline for that turning movement. And it misses the building. There's room there to make that turn according to this plan. So, and this is the dash line for the other side, just of that vehicle pulling into that space right here. So I think the shift can be accomplished and the parking space can be moved from behind the building to in front of the building so that it's still, the site will still allow for 5 parking spaces. So I think those changes, and then this is the building that's proposed. It's a residential building, residential unit. Right now, there's 2 buildings and 2 units in the front building, 1 unit in the back building. The front building would be changed to 1 dwelling unit. Then this is the second dwelling unit, and then the third dwelling unit would be at the back of the lot. So the lot's large enough to accommodate 3 dwelling units with the zoning that's in place. And so here's elevations. Of course, they'll have to go through the BAR process and obtain their approval for this building, but that is the request. Let's see, I'll just leave it there. But I think they've satisfied the.
You know anything about the shed issue?
Well, I think this was done to try and accommodate
Oh, the shed
the
stays.
shed, and the applicant is here. He can,
Okay.
and the neighbor is also here, so they can address that. But I think this does what we were talking about doing in the meeting last week to try and resolve that issue. So my recommendation is for approval of the variances to allow this.
All right, thank you, Lee. Is there anybody in the audience tonight who wishes to speak in opposition to the application for 60 Spring Street? If you're in opposition, please raise your hand. Okay, we'll give you your opportunity first. We'd like to hear from the owner or applicant. Mr. Barr? Yes, sir.
Who raised their hand for opposition?
Gentleman in the back.
Oh, you, okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be back before you. I'm pleased to be here with my friend, Monty Brown. If I could reminisce just very briefly, Monty's father, who was the late Robert Brown, was one of the very first clients I ever represented in 1969. It was just around the corner ago. And I closed a real estate transaction for Monty's father, and now I'm representing his son, who sits here with me, next to me, with a prominent gray beard. So time flies, doesn't it? Did you have a chance to put up those photographs I sent you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think I did. No, I did not add those. I'm sorry.
All right, that's okay. Then I can take you on a quick tour so you can visualize what it is that we're talking about here. So I'm going to hand you each a plat, and then folded within the plat are some photographs. And I will walk you through those so that you can be oriented. And the plat has numbers on it which are associated with the photographs you're looking at. And then I also have another set of photographs that are Google Earth that I'd like you to refer to. The property that we're talking about is 60 Spring Street is the property to the right of the center there. It has a white car parked in the back. I'll just tell you that. Earlier. So if you take a look at the set of photographs, and then I'll segue out to the aerial after that. You take a look at the photographs, there ought to be numbers up at the top right. So number one is taken across the street. You see the house with the red sign, that's 60 Spring Street. And the right of that is 58. That's where Mr. Darian, who's the gentleman back here with the hat, that's where he lives. And as I understand it, at the last hearing, I don't know if you all remember it was 2 weeks ago, no, whenever it was, the one that was deferred. Marty wasn't here. A fellow who did the site plan was here. Mr. Darian got up and had some comments about as I understand it, about the shed or maybe the property line or the boundary line. Anyhow, as I follow it, the board suggested that it be deferred so the parties could talk. So to reach to the end of this, I met with Mr. Darian. He was very helpful. He was very cooperative. And to make a long explanation short, what Mr. Darian said was if you can relocate this building back 10 feet, the new building, 10 feet, that will alleviate my concerns about the effect of the building on the shade next to my property and to some extent the water flow. And so we're not relocating it 10 feet back, we're relocating it 12 feet back. And that was necessary, frankly, in order to accommodate the three parking spaces. So to take you on a quick tour then, if you look at the photographs, that's across the street. And you see the 60 Spring, 58 next to it. The next photograph is a closer view of 60 Spring. That's photo number 2. You look at it on the map, right at the corner. Photo number 3 is taken down that driveway. You're looking back at the building in the back of the lot. There, I'm going too fast, raise your hand. Photo number 3 is in the back. Photo number 4 is taken from that rear building, looking back toward both 60 and 58. And you'll see on the left that that construction, that's the shed that is depicted on the plat. And apparently that was of some interest or concern to Mr. Darian, but we're relocating the new construction so that the new construction will be to the north and out and not adjacent to that shed. Then photographs 5 and 6 are closer views of the shed and the back of Mr. Darian's house. Photograph number 6 is taken because if you look at the plat above the circle number 7, if you look at that on the plat, you'll see that there is an old, it says remnants of old building or wall is noted on the plat. And if you look at the photograph at number 6, you can make that out right to the left of that far post. And number 7 is a close-up shot at where that old wall abuts the shed. And number 8 is another picture that shows that old wall. So those pictures showing the old wall are intended simply to orient you to where that is on the ground. Now, among other things, Monty negotiated with the City Housing Authority and has a long-term lease on that strip of land on the plat, if you look at the strip of land to the right of the numbers 7 and 8, that's owned by the City Housing Authority. And they've given Monty a lease for 30 years. For 30 years for the use of that. And so that enables this parking that you see on the diagram. So that this is the strip owned by the housing authority, so that cars will be able to negotiate up and park into that leased area. So that's to accommodate the parking. And cars can get in and out. Now you'll have, just like when you parallel park, if you live on a street in the city of Charleston, you have to parallel park, whether it's at your house or going to a law office or wherever you're going, you have to turn your steering wheel left and right to wheel out. Well, that's probably what will have to happen here, but that's in conformity, as I understand it, with all of the codes and regulations. So classically, if you now take a look at the aerial photographs, classically, this case falls within the parameters of the criteria for a variance. In as much as there are extraordinary conditions associated with the property. You look at the aerial photographs, and that's why I did them. You look at the closer aerial photograph, and then look at the photograph of the entire block. You'll see that vast surface area between the front building at 60 and the rear. I don't think you'll see another property, at least on the block, similarly situated, except right to the north of it, where there are other dwellings, such as we want to do here. So I think there are extraordinary conditions associated with the property that don't generally apply to other properties in the area. I think the strict application of the setbacks here would create an unreasonable restriction on the use of this property. Look at that vast open area between the two buildings. Respectfully, I would suggest that the variance being sought is de minimis. It's a very slight variance. And in fact, by moving the building back, we substantially mitigated the setback requested from the front, from 80 feet to 76 feet 8 inches. And the final criteria is that it works no substantial detriment to the adjoining property. And here, I think, thanks to Mr. Darian, we were able to work with Mr. Darian, who he told me earlier, and I know he's a man of his word, has no objection to what we've now done. In fact, I think he agrees with it. And I will also say, and I don't know, is Mr. Hawkins here? Marion, is that, hi, Marion, nice to meet you. Marion Hawkins is, we talked on the phone, but I've never met him. Marion Hawkins is the neighborhood association president, who wrote a letter asking that the matter be deferred from the last hearing, with which I concurred, because Monty got me involved late in the game. And so I needed some time to fill myself in as well. So we coordinated with the neighborhood council, we coordinated with the neighbor, at least Mr. Darian, and the gentleman speaking, sitting next to Jack, I haven't met him, and so he may have something to say, and I'll respond to that at the end. So again, I think that the case falls classically within the criteria for a variance, and I think as an additional factor is the front building is being reduced from a 2-unit occupancy to a 1. So the density of the property is not being increased by this variance. So I thank you for your time and your patience, and I ask you to approve. And if there's any response to it required, I think after we hear from the gentleman, I would ask to be provided a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. I don't think so right now. Let's see if anybody else is here to speak in support of the application for 60 Spring Street. Anybody else here to speak in support? Okay, we'll hear from the gentleman in the back. If you'll come up to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Realize I had to come all the way up here. My name is Chris Lane. I'm owner of 56 Spring Street. I also actually occupy the property. I'm one of only two people that actually lives on this block of Spring Street. The rest of it is all short-term rentals. I understand I'm not the directly adjacent neighbor, so my opinion on the topic doesn't bear quite the weight as if I were at 58. But I think I have a couple concerns, generally speaking, especially being an actual resident on the block. Parking is my first concern. This block of Spring Street, especially after the two-way conversion, lost several parking spaces. Parking is very difficult at this time. The average short-term rental guest is not exactly the world's greatest driver. So I have real concerns about people that are staying here being able to navigate a driveway that's already very narrow, being able to turn into these very narrow parking spots that require, I mean, not, you know, if you put 10 people in it, I think 8 of them are going to struggle to get into these spots, especially if they have a larger vehicle. If you have a large SUV, you've got a group of people staying there. It's adding more people to park in spots that don't exist. And so right now there is ample parking there. I guess one of my questions would be, does vacant land actually constitute an extraordinary circumstance? I certainly don't think it does. I understand I'm not the deciding factor there, but it is a question that I have. I also have concerns when it comes to the runoff created by adding another building. So where I am at 56 is kind of the lowest point of the block. We have a lot of rainwater that runs that way every time it rains. Base of my driveway is what floods because everything comes from both sides. So by adding another dwelling, we're taking up a lot of, you know, ground space that was absorbing rain, and essentially it's shedding directly in my direction. The city housing that's back there, that sort of owned property by the city, is raised. It's about 3 feet higher than my property. So what we would be doing is the water would be shedding off of this dwelling onto that, and essentially then runs back onto my property again. So I have just a lot of question there of just a lot of excess water that currently is absorbed, and where is that going to go? I already have a moisture issue that's really hard to mitigate. The sunlight that I do get is one of the only reasons that it dries out. The way that this building is going to go is going to really affect the sunlight that I get, and I'm going to have a hard time drying out an area that's already hard to dry when I have less sunlight and more water going that way. So while I understand, again, I'm not the adjacent neighbor, between the parking, runoff water, and the lack of sunlight for an area that already has trouble drying out, they are real concerns I have and how they're going to affect my property. And again, being somebody that lives there, it feels different than being just a short-term rental where you're affecting somebody that's not actually there. The back unit of that is my home that I've lived there for 10 years. I renovated this property in 2014. So for me, this is something that will impact me personally. And I just don't love the idea of it based on, I think, some really legitimate daily use concerns. So that's my 2 cents on the top.
Thank you, Mr. Lant. Can you can
So
identify your property? It's the sort of a gray roof here.
Gray
side
roof,
building. And are those 2 separate structures there?
no, single structure units A and B,
Okay. And
but
and you
single,
live in the rear?
I live in the rear, I live in B.
Okay. And A is
It is a
short-term
short-term rental, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not, you know, I understand it's a thing. It's why I bought this property 10 years ago.
Sure.
But it is owner occupied.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right. We will let you know if we have any questions for you. Thank you.
listen.
Anybody else who wishes to speak in opposition to the application for 60 Spring Street? All right, seeing no one else in opposition, we'll give Mr. Barr an opportunity to address the concerns that were raised.
Well, I don't have that much to say. Had I known, sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name. Had I known of this gentleman's concerns, I would have reached out to him and had a conversation with him to understand better his points, except I can say this, we know that if there is anything uppermost in the mind's eye of the city of Charleston today, it is surface water and its control. And although I do not deal with the TRC, I I know of its reputation for being careful, strict, and sending people back to the drawing board about the concerns expressed by the gentleman, and so that the city administrative process going forward, if you will grant this application, will not be slight. And I dare say also offers to neighbors in the course of those processes the opportunity to speak with more specific detail about matters that the city administrators understand and can understand the control of, and if they can impose the conditions. I don't, respectfully, I don't know that this board has the capacity. I know Mr. McKay is in the construction industry, but has or the authority, for that matter, to regulate a narrow drainage control matter that is more appropriately the subject matter for the technical review committee, which, as we all know, is comprised of many disciplines within the city regulatory bodies. The idea being that they all act as one and communicate with each other. So we're not at all insensitive to the gentleman's concerns, but respectfully, I think that the better venue for them will be at the TRC after this matter, hopefully, is approved. So thank you very much.
Mr. Park, what he raised a couple of other concerns. One was about the parking, and the final concern was about the potential impediment to natural light, sunlight.
Well, if I may I reply?
Yes, please. That's
Well, the code requires 5 spaces. We have 5 spaces, so I understand that traffic is an issue in the city, but we're in full compliance. There's no variance at issue there. And look at the pictures. Look at the proximity of the gentleman's house to the house next to him and the house on the other side, and that's Charleston. I had a case one time here where I was objecting to somebody who was adding on to a house behind my client's house up in the northwest section of the city. I can't remember exactly where. And I remember Mike Robinson was on the board. He said, well, Mr. Barr, he said, everybody in Charleston lives elbow to jowl next to each other. I said, that's what a city is about. So my response to that, at the risk of sounding flippant, is that that's what the city of Charleston is about. And frankly, I think that is a part of what imparts its charm. So I suppose I rest my case in those words.
okay. All right. I had a question for Mr. Land, and you don't have to come all the way up here, but I see a couple of cars behind the building, the structure on your property. Does your lot continue on past there? Is that your parking, or is that a neighbor's property?
That is the city housing authority behind my property,
Okay,
which is.
so your property line ends close to the rear of that building.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for the city, questions for the applicant?
You said the property is roughly the city housing authority property is roughly 3 feet. Roughly higher than.
Probably a little high, so I've got a retaining wall. The retaining wall comes up to about my eye level. And
Okay.
the ground, the level behind it probably comes up to my shoulder. So that's probably more than 3 feet, closer to 4 feet. And that extends basically the length of my property, a length of 58, which is Jack's property. And then at 60 drops back down to ground level. So it's kind of like it's raised along the 60 property line and then cuts back and runs basically down the rest of Spring Street to St. Philip at a raised height. And there's an old retaining wall that's like old terracotta wall that runs down the Spring Street side most of the way until about my property, and then we replaced it with block when we did our renovation. And then, do you have any retaining? Is there a wall or is it
I
just?
don't, I just have
The terracotta wall with the river of water that comes down from Beauregard Street. So the city housing authority.
Yeah, and the way that that property is sloped, it essentially all runs back toward the houses on Spring.
I was looking at, yeah, I'm looking just sort of generally at the slopes on the 60 Spring Street property, and on the east side, they're at about 13 feet, and they drop about 3 feet towards the southwest corner. So I just trying to make sense of what else is going on in sort of the area. Thank you. Let's get. Yeah.
Lee, as part of the city review process, before a construction permit is issued, there are certain stormwater standards that must be met by the property owner. Is that right? Before they can build?
That's correct. They, for a project where the result is 3 or more units, they're building a third unit. And by building this building, the project will need to go through the technical review committee of the city and be reviewed and approved by that committee. And that committee includes people from the stormwater department of the city, engineers who review the plans. And they actually have very detailed requirements for projects like this. And I think most everything on the peninsula, according to their regulations, is in what they call a special protection area, which means you've got to go above and beyond the standard set of rules for how you deal with stormwater runoff. And so it's very difficult to get through that process with these properties, but it is possible. But that's how that matter is reviewed from the city's perspective.
Looking at the photos now, I mean, it's not asphalt on that parking area in the space in between the buildings. It looks like it's some kind of a gravel, but it doesn't look.
I got dirt and gravel mix,
Yeah,
currently very porous.
it is forest.
Yes, very much so.
And, you know, Mr. Barr is correct in a sense, this board doesn't really have the jurisdiction to control stormwater runoff. That's handled by another city department. There is a part of the variance test says the authorization of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good. Therefore, the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. And I don't know that we have any can't say that we're sitting here today with knowledge that there's going to be a stormwater problem as a result of this construction. That's for somebody else to make determination on. As for the parking, they're in compliance with the zoning ordinance, right?
Yes, I believe their plans meet the requirements.
And then the light and air test is really a special exception test and not a variance test.
Specifically, it would be a special exception test, although that's always something you can consider on variance as well, although they are meeting the setback requirement on the east side, which is a minimum of 3 feet.
All right, Hal. Mr. Morrison, adjacent property. Is that a property in immediate proximity, adjoining? Or is it property that's on down the block?
Jason is next door. Period. It's not vicinity property. I mean, I think we've covered this.
Yeah.
move approval.
All right, Mr. Morrison moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Bennett seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. Please note for the record, Mr. Goodwin did not vote. He recused himself and abstained from this vote. But the request for the variances is granted. Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. All right. Next item on our agenda. B, new applications. Number 1, 5 Cummings Street, Charleston Village, Council District number 8, TMS number 457-04-03-017, Zone DR2F, requesting the first 1-year extension of the vested right that expires on December 31, 2025, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-206 on April 20th, 2021 to allow an accessory use office to an existing church with conditions. Requesting a variance from section 54-206 to allow the building to encroach within the 25-foot setback from adjoining property lines in a DR2F diverse residential zone district. The owner is Susie Carter, applicant is Simmons Young. Mr. Batchelder.
This property sits on the west side of Cumming Street, just north of Befane in Charleston Village. And back in 2021, Grace Church received a special exception to allow them to use this property for an office. This residentially zoned property is an office. And of course, churches are allowed in residentially zoned districts. They just have to come through the Board of Zoning Appeals and seek your approval. And so they obtained that approval. And in addition, the special exception requirements do state that there's a 25-foot setback requirement for buildings from adjoining property lines. And so obviously this can't meet that requirement. And with the building on this site, so they obtained a variance for that. And they're simply asking for a 1-year extension of the vested right that was attached to that approval 2 years ago. And one of the conditions as stated here has to do with this letter from Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. And we have received an updated letter from the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association, just indicating that they're still supportive of this request with the conditions that were originally attached to the approval, which are spelled out here. And so with that letter, this essentially is the same request that came before the board 2 years ago, and we recommend that the extension be granted.
Okay. And just for the record, and so I'm clear, the variance request is not anything new.
It's nothing new.
That was part of the original request. And so the vested rights extension is just reconfirming that variance that was previously granted. Is that right?
Correct. And
Okay.
special exception.
And special exception. And then do we need to move specifically because there's an updated letter that these conditions shall apply to the approval, or are they already baked in, so to speak?
They're already baked in, but I think you could reference the updated letter because we had a letter back in 2021. This is a 2024 letter, so I think it's worth mentioning that.
Is there anybody here opposed to this application for 2 Cumming Street? Nobody's opposed. We have owner applicant here.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make one clarification.
Sure, please.
It's Grace Church that owns the property. Susan Carter is the head of the committee for 5 Cumming Street.
Thank you. All right, comments, questions?
I'll make a motion for approval.
All right, move to approve with the condition that the all the conditions of the March 18, 2024 letter from Charleston Village Association will apply. Okay.
Second.
All right, motion is seconded by Mr. Morrison. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. We do have Mr. Bennett who abstained because of his recusal from this matter, but otherwise the extension of the vested rights is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda. B2, 1075 Avenue of Oaks, Maryville, Ashleyville, Council District Number 9, TMS number 418-06-00-137, Zone SR1, requesting a variance from Section 54-301 to allow construction of a detached accessory building garage with a 33.7-foot front setback. 60 feet are required. The owner is Kelly Ravenstein. The applicant is Parker Best. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a property in a new residential development in Ashleyville, West Ashley. And this map shows the location of this property. This is sort of was a peninsula of land. It's not really truly a peninsula, but it kind of functioned that way. And this was the house that sat at the very back of that property that was mostly undeveloped and has a beautiful alley of oaks. And here's an aerial view. You see the house right here. And all these other houses are newly constructed, part of the redevelopment of this property. And Avenue of Oaks was preserved, and the neighborhood is called Avenue of Oaks, I believe. But one thing you'll notice is that there's no garage on this property. This is a house that was not built according to the flood zone elevation requirements that we have today. So there's no space under the house to park. And the way it's situated on the lot, there's no other place to put a garage. So they're seeking your approval to the setback variance to allow a garage to be placed kind of on that a part of that concrete parking area that's in front. The other houses, as you can see, have a lot of them have garages under the house because they were elevated to meet the FEMA requirements. Here's another plan of the neighborhood. And, more information. Here's photographs. Drive under house to the left, new house, and then the house in question to the right. Typical of the neighborhood, they either have parking underneath or these attached garages that are behind the house in a section where there's not flood zone impacts. And another example of that. So this is the plan. They have a small garage located right up the front corner of the parking area. And just a simple little one-story building. So I think there's a clear case in this example, in this case of a exceptional, extraordinary condition. This is the only house that doesn't have a garage in that neighborhood. There's no other place to put it. And so they are seeking this variance, and I think they've got a good case for a variance my recommendation is for approval.
All right, thank you, Lee. Is there anybody here opposed to the application for 1075 Avenue of Oaks? If you're in opposition, please raise your hand. Do we have the owner or applicant here? Anything you'd like to say to the board?
All good.
All right. Any questions for Lee?
I just have one question. When was the original house built? Is it an old home?
I believe it's historic.
Yes, it is a historic home.
1922.
So when this neighborhood was developed, there were, the State Historic Preservation Office was involved in some respects, I think, and maybe you had to, their signs had to be placed throughout the neighborhood or something to that effect to,
So I guess there's no other homes in the area built in that, in that time frame.
not on this
This
property,
was the one.
right?
Any other questions? Motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Goodman seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously and the variance for 1075 Avenue of Oaks is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda. B3, 3399 Blacklock Road, Johns Island, Council District Number 3, PMS number 318-00-00-105, Zone C. Requesting a variance from section 54-824 to allow a subdivision of this lot to create one additional lot that does not meet the required 70-foot lot frontage requirement. Owner is GANB LLC, Dr. Nick Gratznick. Applicant is George Gratznick. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a property out on Johns Island. You see here on this zoning map, with the colored properties are in the city. And so this is right at the frontier of the city if you're heading out or heading into the city from Kiowa or Seabrook or that southern end of Johns Island. And the airport, Johns Island Airport is right over here, just to give you a point of reference. But it is on the outskirts of the city of Charleston and was annexed into the city. Here's an aerial view of the property. You can see it's a wooded property and somewhat rural area of Johns Island. The applicant's materials, and this is just showing what they want to do. This is an indication of the 1 acre lot that, or 1.5 acre lot that they would like to subdivide in this property to allow them to build a home on the lot. And zoning says you can subdivide the property and then create 1.5 acre lots, but each lot has to have frontage on a public street or satisfactory public easement. And the closest street in this case is Hut Road, which is down here at the bottom of the screen. So there's, and it's accessed through this narrow strip of land before you get back to this 75 acre piece. So can't really meet the zoning ordinance requirement for the frontage, given the shape of the property. It is a very exceptional situation in the city. We don't run into this situation very often. It was created, and the parcel was created before it was ever annexed into the city. So it was annexed like this. And when it was annexed in 1990, originally it was given a zoning that allowed more development of homes on the site. But later on, in 2007, it was downzoned to the current conservation zoning category that applies today. So you can't really build much on it, but they would like to build a house and be able to subdivide and create this lot for financing purposes. And let's see if there's any, these are photographs of the property. I think these stakes maybe indicate the corners of the proposed lot. And more photos. And then this would be the strip of land that provides access into the property, and that's part of the property itself, but it's not wide enough to satisfy the 60-foot frontage requirement. So, or 70-foot frontage requirement. So I think there's a case for a variance here, given the conditions that exist with this property, and my recommendation is for approval.
All right, thank you, ladies. Is there anyone here opposed to the variance application for 3399 Blacklock Road? All right, so no one in opposition. We have the owner or applicant. So
Yeah, this is a lot that my son wants to build a house on. And that would be it's very important to our family that he be allowed to do that. He presently lives up in Washington DC, and this will be quite a contrast for him to be able to come back home. So,
thank you, sir.
and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But this is basically a tree farm, and we plan to keep it that way until we have too many neighbors.
Okay, and I assume you are Dr.
Actually, they've got that all.
Oh, okay.
I'm George Gratzik. I'm the physician. My wife's the physician. My son's a software engineer, and my other son is up in Washington, we're representing, wants to build a house on this.
Okay, thank you.
Whole family back down in Charleston.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions for the city?
One question, Lee, can you explain, it sounded like there were two remedies. One was having the frontage requirement, the other was having easement through the property that it would pass through. Is that correct, or did I misunderstand?
A satisfactory public easement. Is that what
Oh,
you're-
public easement?
Yeah,
Okay.
which basically means a private street
Okay,
in our world.
gotcha. Maybe I misunderstood. I was thinking it was easement with the adjacent property that, the legal.
I should also note, in the Charleston County has different rules for how you can subdivide out in the rural areas of the county. And our rules don't work well in rural situations, and that's kind of what we have here. So
Typically, you would need to show ingress and egress to subdivide, right? You need to show access.
under the county's rules,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so. I think they're pretty lenient on this sort of thing versus what we do.
This is a conservation easement on this whole site?
Well, the zoning is conservation. It still allows it to be developed. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, you could build a street, plat a right of way, build a street into the property, and then subdivide and create lots off of that. It would be a very expensive street because it's a long way back from Hut Road. But that is allowed by the zoning ordinance, not what we would like to see, though. Actually, what his plans are is really great, really. So
So it's 75 acres,
75 acres.
and then can you pull that back? Well, I see, okay, so
Yeah.
you get into it from the Black Oak Road. Once you get there to the site, is that gonna be an easement to the house, or how? What makes it's a plot in the middle of the land,
Yes,
so.
that's a great question. I was talking to my attorney, real estate attorney, and he said we will grant an easement for that lot through our property, which that will then allow it. And basically, this is so my son can get financing for a house, He owns part of this land, but not all of it, and so it makes more sense to subdivide him out a piece of land that he can then build a house and gain equity in it. But no, there's an existing road that already runs back through there, and we'll just grant him an easement to get to his house.
So in real estate terms, what I see there, or what would be perceived by an appraiser, is that plot would be landlocked. So there would be no legal right to get to it without the easement in place. how do you, for example, for the city to tax it, they would tax it at $200 because you gotta fly to it to get to it.
Well,
So,
trust me, they won't tax it to $200.
okay. All right.
People with authority, I don't think they know.
I think, Bill, I think what the owner is saying is that that black line represents an actual existing road right now. And while it may not be dedicated
Yeah.
as a public road, it's nevertheless a private road. And so it is in fact accessible by private road. And private roads can be maintained by the property owner and you know, so long as Charleston doesn't have it, so long as the city doesn't have a rule that requires public dedicated road access to a new lot before it is subdivided, which Lee is shaking his head. No, we don't require.
Not
that.
if you grant the variance.
And how, out of the 75 acres, how big is the lot that's being that they're asking?
1.5 acres. Which is the minimum size of a lot in the conservation zone district.
Typically, I would like to see a easement or a survey showing the right to get to the site. Just to have, right now, it's a site in the middle of a larger plot. I'm assuming you're gonna have a separate TMS number. Is that right?
You know, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. So that lot will have a separate tax map number, be a
Right.
separate parcel,
And it will also have a recorded easement.
right, which it'll have a recorded easement to the site.
Yes.
Okay, we can probably make that requirement if we approve it.
Well, it actually is a requirement for financing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The bank actually,
Mhm.
we got way down the road to do this, and then we called up and said, we want to subdivide this, and then we were told no, and that was 3 months ago. We were hoping we'd been, way past this, but we were put on hold until that, so we'd already investigated all those options. You have to have an easement to that landlocked property. You're absolutely right.
Right.
Or there won't be any monies lent to it, for the obvious reasons that you've stated, which is, how could this have any value if no one can get to it?
So you wouldn't have an objection to having a condition of the variance be that an easement for ingress and egress to the new lot be recorded.
I'm sorry, before the new lot is put in?
No, with-
Recorded together.
So
Together.
Yeah, I mean, what, they're both the same, it's gonna be done, but we're gonna get the surveyor out there, and he's gonna do both of them at the same time,
Yeah.
right.
okay?
Yeah.
Right, that's
And-
all I'm asking, can you do it cost effectively?
So this board has the ability to grant an approval with a condition. And so to satisfy Mr. Goodwin's concern, we could approve the variance with the condition that an access easement for ingress and egress to the new lot is recorded.
And it will be, and
Okay.
it is, and that's.
And I'm saying there's no objection to that.
No, I mean, I'm trying to tell you, we just don't make us split them up and do them separately.
The reason, I understand what you're talking
Uh-huh.
about, but the reason being is because once you go get the financing and an appraiser gets it, they're gonna hold you up because of all these other things. And we wanna make sure that the city is in a position to appropriately legally access the property by emergency vehicle or anything else that
Right.
could happen. You have a tree
Actually,
farm there,
fire
we have a
department-
hurricane or something. We gotta get to the site and we need to know the legal way to get to the site. So I'm with you there. You wanna save money. But that's the thought process behind what it looks like right now based on,
Trust me,
What
a
we're
fire
looking at.
truck has been back there many times. It's a logging road. We have logging trucks that actually have gone down that road. It's well maintained, because we like it well maintained. It's a high road. It's and that's the road that he's gonna have an easement on. I just don't want it to get too confused here. I mean, why wouldn't we grant my son an easement to his house? I mean, that's. Can you grant it? Huh? Yeah, can you grant an easement to something that doesn't exist before the variance? That's what I'm saying. Let's just.
Whether you're saying the lot does not exist currently,
Yeah,
the variance would create the lot.
let's just do them both together.
That's what you're saying.
That's what we're
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we're on the same
Well, as
page.
long as, I can tell you right now, I'll show up with the plat and they'll say, no, you have to do the easement first. This is, this is,
We'll make sure it's done together. That's,
Okay, I mean-
that's the key.
nothing has gone smoothly with this, okay? That's what you understand. You think this is, I gave them the money for the, this meeting and they told me I hadn't paid yet. So don't tell me things don't get screwed up. They get very screwed up very quick, okay? All right, I'm just asking you to, give me the benefit of the doubt, sir. I'm gonna grant my son access to his property. That's just the way I am.
I believe you're gonna do what
And
you wanna do.
you're throwing this roadblock out there that I think you don't understand by making it, it'll get done. Just let me do them both together, okay? All right, that's all I'm asking.
So just maybe so for clarity's sake, I don't think there's any reason why that wouldn't happen. If Mr. Goodwin makes a motion for an approval with a condition. I think it's pretty typical. We do that quite frequently, I think, where there's a requirement for something for easement to be recorded. I don't think not had issues with that in the past, but I understand your concern. But I don't believe that we would be creating a roadblock.
Why don't we, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think we're all on the same page.
Why don't we just say that the subdivision, on the condition that the subdivision plat shows the access easement to and from the new lot? How about that?
That's exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm perfect.
Anybody ready to make a motion?
I make the motion that we approve it, subject to the access easement.
Okay. Subject to the condition that the access easement is shown on the recorded subdivision plat.
There you go.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
All right, the motion is seconded by Mr. Bennett. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes and the variance for 3399 Blacklock Road is approved unanimously with the condition that the easement will be shown on the recorded subdivision plat. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm recused from the final items, and Mr. Bennett's going to be stepping in for me.
All right. Final item is item B4, Spring Street behind 158 Spring Street and 1 Rosemont Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood. TMS number 460-1102-127 and 460-1102-088. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow 30 dwelling units on these combined lots with 805 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit, 1650 square feet required. And request variance from section 54-317 to allow 30 dwelling units with 28 parking spaces. Ordinance requires 45 spaces. Zoned LB/DR-2F. Owner is 158 Spring Street LLC and K&K Properties LLC. Applicant is CKC Properties LLC. Mr. Batchelder.
This application concerns 2 lots in the Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood. And this map shows the location of those 2 properties. I've outlined the 2 lots in red. And wondering, Emma, I think you might want to go out and grab the approval form for the prior application from Jeff right there, if you could do that. Thank you. Sorry. So Both of those lots are zoned DR2F, which is a multifamily residential zoning category. The pink and the red shaded properties indicate the limited business and the general business commercially zoned properties. So these are adjacent to, but they are not zoned commercial. And there are 2 points of access. So there's one point of access down this strip of private property, which is also owned by the applicant. And it runs all the way back and provides access to both of these adjoining properties over here, as well as this property in the back. And then there's Rosemont Street up here, short little street off of the crosstown. And that does provide access to 1 Rosemont, which is this lot right here. And then would provide access into this property as well. 1 Rosemont, just one more thing about 1 Rosemont. You'll see that there are 2 existing buildings on that lot. Those are both historic cottages, and they're in very poor condition. So part of the proposal here is that those would be restored and turned back into residential units. Here's an aerial view showing the larger piece right here. There are some grand trees over here on the side of the west side of the property. And then this is 1 Rosemont next door, and these are the 2 houses right here, rooftops that you see. And this is that property outlined. 1 Rosemont, the property with the 2 houses. These are the application materials that were filed for part of the image overview, site analysis, and surveys of the property. There's a shed over here. It's not historic and can be removed. This is a very large grand tree back here. Sorry.
So those 2 trees are the grand trees, the ones that are shown?
Yes, this is the largest of the 2 right here. And then there's one right here as well. One Rosemont shown here again, the 2 houses. These are the homes on that 1 Rosemont lot. And you can see that they haven't been occupied some time, and they're really in a state of complete disrepair. And the X, of course, is what the fire marshal puts on the building to indicate that it's a problem. Photos of that. Old Sanborn maps just showing 1 Rosemont. This is the property in question. This is the property next door. It's illustrating that access out to Spring Street. The 2 grand trees shown in these large circles here. Those would be the protective zones around those trees based on the diameter of the trunk. 57 Laurel Oak. And I guess I don't have a photograph of the other one. So this is, these are slides that were. So I'm going to let the applicant go through those. But I'll back up and just mention a few things. So the applicant will explain that they've been working on this plan for a while. Go back to this they've been working on a plan for these two properties for a while. Attempted to get demolition approval from the BAR for these two houses, and that was denied. And so and I should also point out, this lot combined with this one will allow a total of 14 dwelling units under the current zoning. And that would require 21 parking spaces, 1.5 spaces per unit. And so that's what the current zoning allows. The site, because of its limited access, does have some constraints from the fire department, because the fire department determines how far they can pull a hose, which is 150 feet, I think, typically. And then they'll allow for some extension if there's an analysis that demonstrates it's possible. And, you know, you go through that technical process, and they might agree to allow buildings with a different type of construction, sprinklers, that type of thing. So that's all for them. So those are constraints, certainly on this site. But the applicant is requesting variances that I don't think are appropriate. And I say that because even though they might have a great plan for the site, and they've obviously got support, their justification for what they want, I don't think works. I don't think that meets the variance test. And because normally we're granting relief to a little bit of a change here or there to the rules to allow somebody to deal with a situation that prevents reasonable development of their property. I don't think there's anything that would prevent reasonable development of this property as it exists. They're citing some issues, the limited access, the fire department issues, the grand trees, the historic homes, as reasons for wanting their variances, but their variances are really to allow more development on the site. So that's just a simple read of the application from my perspective as somebody who reviews these kind of things on a daily basis. And so I think they might have a great plan, and that's not the issue tonight. But how they get there to the approval process is not through the Board of Zoning Appeals. I don't think this is the right place for them to come. I think what they need to be doing is going through a different route. Maybe they need to go for a rezoning of the property into a planned unit development. That's been done a number of times with sites like this that have unique constraints, but offer opportunities for something interesting to be done. And with what they are proposing to do, like I said, they want to do, in effect, I think, more development on the site, more units than they are currently allowed, because of these constraints, and that doesn't make sense to me. So for those reasons, I'm not supporting this request, but the applicant wants to move forward. And they've got their slide presentation, which is a little bit different from what was in the image overview. So I'll let them go through that. And there is support. The neighborhood association is supportive of this. And then there are a couple of letters that came in late that I'll just hand around. And I've got enough for everybody here. Want to just pass those. But that's my position on this request.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelor. So the city is not in favor of the application. Is there anyone present in opposition? Okay, you'll have your opportunity. We'll hear from the applicant and or the owner first. Great.
Good evening. My name is Colin Colbert. I'm with CKC Properties. We're the applicant for the variance tonight. It's a conditional variance request at 158 Spring Street and 1 Rosemont Street. Is there a way for me to click through the slides?
No, I'll just advance them. I'll just tell you.
I'll
You just
take
tell
a
me
click,
all
I
of it.
guess. Click, please.
Okay.
The variance request you're gonna hear tonight involves increasing the number of units in site, increasing the number of parking spaces on site, but maintaining the same number of bedrooms and occupants that current zoning would allow. And so where vehemently differ in this isn't offering an opportunity to do more development. It's an opportunity to work around the hardships that exist on the site and develop the site in a manner that we believe the zoning intended it to be developed. As part of this, developing this variance request, we work closely with the preservation community, the adjacent neighbors, the neighborhood association, and a lot of them are here tonight to support this variance request because of that. And as part of that, we conditioned the variance in a manner where these additional units, it's a 16-unit density request. They have to be 1, 2, 3 bedroom units, and they cannot maintain more than 56 total bedrooms on the site, which is exactly what is allowed under current zoning now, with 14 units, 4 bedrooms apiece, totaling 56 bedrooms. Additionally, as Lee said, the zoning requires 21 spaces for those 56 bedrooms under current zoning. If this is approved, it's conditioned in a manner where each of the market rate units would need to have 1 parking space, increasing parking on site by 33% for 7 total spaces. Additionally, the conditions would require that the 2 Freedman's cottages are preserved per preservation guidelines and that they'd maintain deed restricted for 30 years as workforce housing units. This is something that the community involvement pushed for and that we're comfortable doing. Please click, and we can skip this, click again. To further familiarize you with the site, here's the survey. Lee mentioned this access. It's a small sliver parcel that, yes, we do own, but it's actually an easement to access this rear lot that was otherwise landlocked other than about a 6-foot access to the Rosemont right away here. This is 1 Rosemont Street, the 2 Freedman's cottages. Obviously, this property line will be abandoned. You can see the 71-inch live oak in the northwestern corner of the site and the 57-inch laurel oak on the western side, the western property line. This easement access is pinched by 2 historic structures that will not be moved. Provides about 9 feet of access, which is fine for vehicular access, but it will not allow fire trucks access to the site. And obviously, next slide, please. This is the Google Earth view. It's a little easier to see what I'm talking about here. The pink dashed line represents the access off of Spring. It's about a 9-foot access pinched between these historically significant buildings, which will not move. This is the access off of Rosemont, which comes off the crosstown. Rosemont used to be part of the Canberra-Ellerboro neighborhood until it was somewhat severed from it with the Septima Parkway coming through in the 1960s. Now it is a dead-end street, and there is not proper turnaround for fire trucks here, so they can only pull so far into the site. You can see the canopies of the live oak here, the canopies of the laurel oak here, that take up the majority of our western property line. Under current zoning, it would force the majority of the development into this northeastern corner here. And then you can see the 2 historic Freedman's cottages here. They're about 380 square feet apiece. They aren't conducive for single family homes. They don't have bathrooms and kitchens now. They're extremely small, but they would be conducive to studio apartments, which if this variance is approved, they'd be conditioned as workforce housing for 30 years and utilized as that. Next slide, please. Here are some more pictures of the trees. It's an incredible live oak on the south northwestern corner of the site. Obviously, the canopy is pretty incredible. It takes up a good portion of the site. This is a non-historic shed that we have been approved to demolish. And then obviously there's a 57-inch laurel oak in the top left side here. And that is not as pretty as a tree, but it still does take up a good portion of the site. We plan to preserve it. Next slide, please. Here are the two Freedman's cottages. One thing that was misstated is that we did go for demolition approval for the front structure in an effort to preserve the rear. Our thought at the time was that this gave the site the best chance for preservation, just based on the financial constraints of restoring these homes that are about 380 square feet. We thought if no one does something with this lot, we're eventually going to lose them both. So let's do what we can. We can make the numbers work on our side, demolish the front, restore the back. And that's how we ended up talking with the preservation community and the BAR, who suggested, we see you got a lot of hardships on the site. Why don't you apply for a variance and see if there's a way to preserve these buildings, utilizing the variance and maybe finding a better way to develop the site more in context with the way zoning would lend itself for other large lots in this neighborhood. Next slide, please. You can see the access from Rosemont here. There is not proper turnaround for a fire truck, therefore it can only pull so far into the site. And that's important. I'll get to that in a minute. And then obviously the pinched access here. Next slide, please. Now for the hardships. If you could skip to the next slide, please. We've talked a lot about fire truck access, and it plays a huge role in how this site can be developed. What's shown here is what we can do under current zoning. 21 spaces, 14 4-bedroom units, with the entire site kind of the majority of the massing forced towards the northeastern corner of the site. This orange dotted line represents a 200-foot hose length of fire hose from where the truck would have to park in the right away. This pink line represents a 200-foot hose length from where a fire truck could pull off of the dead-end street. The fire code requires it will only allow 150. To put it in zoning or BAR terms, it'll allow a staff level variance to get 200 feet if there's fire suppression systems in the building. To extend beyond that, you need to obtain an AMMR, which is essentially a variance. It's an alternative means and methods request, which we have done working with fire engineers, fire protection engineers, to increase our fire protection systems and be granted an extra 16 feet of grace. So this meets zoning, but we don't believe that this is the right way to develop this site under the way zoning intended it to be if these hardships did not exist. So the prongs of the hardship test. This is an extraordinary exceptional condition. I think everyone can see that. Lots of this size are few and far between in the peninsula in general, but definitely Cannon-Borough, Elliott-Borough, and to be set back this far from a right-of-way and have no emergency access turnaround is definitely an exceptional and extraordinary condition. Two, this doesn't generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. Obviously, this doesn't apply to other properties in the vicinity. Number three, because of these conditions, the application or ordinance to this particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. If you could click to the next slide. If these did not exist, we could develop the site in a manner that I think is more typical with Charleston Court, and more typical, and more what was in mind when the zoning was drafted for large lots such as this on a DR2F lot. If there was no trees and no fire length, we could have 4-bedroom unit, we could disperse them across the site as you normally see in downtown Charleston. If we're granted this variance, we can do smaller footprints, smaller units, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, with external staircases that can span tree root systems, avoid canopies, and they can utilize spot piles to support the stairs rather than get into the tree root systems, and place more small buildings with smaller units stacked on top of each other using external staircases, which are not feasible with 4-bedroom units because you aren't going to walk out of your kitchen living room outside into the rain, up to your bedrooms and back in. It's only feasible if these units are broken down into smaller units. The other hardship, so I think the third prong of the hardship test is met and shown here. And the fourth prong I'll get to when I get done with the second hardship this site exists. Second hardship is the grand trees. They obviously eat up the majority of the western property line. If we are to do 4-bedroom units as zoning allows along this western property line, they won't fit within the canopies, and therefore it forces the development into the northeast corner. Again, these trees, this is the largest live oak on the peninsula. That's been confirmed by Eric Schultz. There is no other tree like this on the peninsula. And although there are a lot of grand trees, I do not think it's typical in this vicinity to see one that takes up your entire western property line. And obviously, for the same reasons as before, we're trying to work between a swinging hose length from the fire truck as well as these grand tree canopies. And in order to do so, we need to break these units down into smaller units in order to develop the site as we believe zoning intended it to be, alleviated from these hardships that unreasonably restrict our ability to utilize the property. So I think 1, 2, and 3 prongs of the hardship test have been met. And now to prong 4, if you wouldn't mind skipping to the next. As stated, zoning allows 14 units, 4 bedrooms, a total of 56 bedrooms on site with 21 parking spaces. Next slide, please. Under this variance, there'll be 28 units, the same 56 market rate bedrooms, no more than currently allowed, as well as 2 workforce housing units that would be 1-bedroom studios and 7 more parking spaces. Next slide, please. There is no impact, no negative impact on the adjacent neighbors, the public good, or the character of the district. There will actually be 33 more spaces on site. 33% more spaces on site. 2 more bedrooms that would be workforce housing units, but it would also allow for the preservation of the 2 Freedman's cottages. Next slide, please. Not only does this not impact the character of the district, but it provides a lot of benefits. There'll be additional parking. Obviously, I've heard in previous applications how Spring Street gets filled with cars. That is an issue in our neighborhood. Having more spaces on site prevents the overflow of parking spilling out onto Spring Street or other surrounding streets. The second benefit is that it ensures the preservation of these 2 historic cottages that may not otherwise survive another 50 years of neglect, which obviously we would never let happen if we acquire the property. Additionally, we're adding 2 workforce housing units to the city's inventory, which is desperately needed. And I think that the tenant mix we're providing by shrinking these units and avoiding the hardship that this site exhibits with the trees and the hose length and working to alleviate that, we'll be able to create a better tenant mix geared towards the housing needs of the community, the neighborhood, that can provide 1, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom units for working people that work in the neighborhood and go to the VA hospital and MUSC. So overall, I think it not only meets the hardship test and does not impact the surrounding areas, but it provides a lot of great benefits to the community. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we have spent a lot of time getting to this point. We started in August of last year, going through and actually getting support for a building that looked much like the original way we were developing the site. Have Rosemont under contract to be acquired and work with the preservation communities to try to find ways to preserve that, as well as to break down the masking of the site to be more in tune with what a typical Charleston court is. So I strongly encourage you to consider this application and ask that you approve it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize. Mr. Colbert, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you. Anybody questions for him before? Anyone else here in favor of the application that wishes to speak? Yep. Why don't we, why don't y'all come on up? Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Marion Hawkins, president of the Canberra Neighbor Association. The applicant presented at our February meeting, and our membership was really found that especially the workforce housing elements, as well as the breaking down of reducing the bedroom count to 2-bedroom units as opposed to 4-bedroom units. We're always concerned about mainly cottage rentals, which when you have 4-bedroom units, they tend to go toward that. The 2-bedroom units would be better, less impact, and seem like even though it's more density, it would allow a better use of working professionals and others. So with those elements especially, our membership voted to support the project. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Harden. I'm not an immediate neighbor to this property, but I do live close. A lot of great things I think have been said and explained very well, so I'm not going to repeat all that. I just want to say that I think that in terms of the social and architectural context of our neighborhood, which I know very well, having lived there a long time, my feeling is that the breaking down of the architecture to smaller buildings is probably more appropriate for the way people live in the neighborhood as long-term residents. And the massing of these buildings on a smaller scale probably is better for our neighborhood overall. I'm very much in favor of this, and Colin has done a good job on all of this project. So I think it meets the hardship tests well. That was explained well, I thought. And those are my other reasons. So
Why
thank
do
you for
you think
listening.
it's better for your neighborhood?
In terms of the architectural breakdown,
Yeah.
I think the tendency of Charleston is to build bigger and larger massed buildings. And my feeling is to break things down into smaller buildings with more space between them. It preserves more or creates more of a neighborhood feeling. And I like the idea of smaller groups of people living in smaller buildings. I hope that made some sense.
Yeah.
Maybe I was.
Thank you. No,
redundant,
thank you. I
but
just wanted to understand that.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Miller. I live at 9 Rosemont, so we're right on the backside. And the benefits of the plan for Rosemont are several. We've been watching the decay of the Friedman homes and don't see a whole lot of options for them getting done unless it's never going to be a profitable standalone project. It's going to need to be something else in order to make it work. The density and breaking down those units from 4 bedrooms, as stated a couple of times, into smaller 2 and 3 bedroom units gets the type of people that are going to be more focused on the neighborhood. And the neighborhood piece of it is important to us because as part of Colin's work with the neighborhood, we'll have pedestrian access from Rosemont back to Spring Street when it's all said and done, which ties Rosemont back into the Cannon-Borough-Ellyborough neighborhood, which has been lost. So there's a couple of, when Colin mentioned there's been no impact to the neighborhood, I would stand up here and say that there's gonna be a positive impact to the neighborhood at Rosemont. So we would request that the variance gets supported.
Thank you.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. Historic Charleston Foundation has reviewed the application for 2 variance requests to redevelop the parcels that are behind 158 Spring Street and 1 Rosemont Street. The applicant originally approached us because they had submitted an application to the BAR for demolition of one of the 2 Freedman's cottages at 1 Rosemont Street. Although these historic cottages are in poor condition and will require extensive work to rehabilitate, the buildings constructed circa 1890 retain their architectural integrity. We believe it is important that these historic structures are rehabilitated. We oppose the demolition of 1 Rosemont Street at the BAR and encourage the applicant to think creatively to incorporate the rehabilitation of these structures as part of the overall development of the property. We are pleased that the applicant has included the preservation of these 2 historic structures in their plan for the site. We are also pleased that these cottages will be deed restricted for affordable or workforce housing for 30 years after completion. HCF is in support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Anyone else in favor?
Good evening. My name is Dusty Rhodes. I live and reside and own it, 6 Rosemont Street. With my wife, been there for about 3 years now. We looked directly out at the 2 cabins and their decay. One day I almost got hit by a brick falling off from the chimney. Looked up and the bird took off. So that's all it takes. It's not far off from falling over, piece by piece. But yeah, largely in favor of Colin's project. Definitely want the restoration of those 2 cabins. If possible, picking up and moving them a little further in the lot, but that's neither here nor there in this conversation. Definitely agree and in support of the smaller units and smaller housing, small family groups, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. rather than larger floors. There's, a lot of college housing, a couple blocks over. Want that in the neighborhood as much as possible. Young professionals, community. And the pedestrian path is also a really big key for us. Yeah, when the crosstown floods, the only place to leave Rosemont without walking through that water is going to be through a pedestrian path that would lead from Rosemont through when it gets spring. That's the natural old high ground.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Anyone else in favor of the application? Not, we'll move into those opposed. Yeah, please come on up.
My name is Bob Holt. I live at 6 Tully Alley in Hannibal, and I own the property immediately adjacent to this property at 156 Street.
Could you pull that up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I first heard
This.
this development immediately before our neighborhood meeting, when I learned that there's an attempted demolition of the Friedman's cottages. My brother and I have been, so I've lived in the neighborhood since 1985. So that's 39 years that I've lived here. My brother and I restored a number of Friedman's cottages. We restored an old kitchen house at 179 St. Philip Street that people said we should have torn down. It was expensive to restore it. We're not the only ones. A lot of Friedman's cottages have been restored in the city. I oppose this variance. I don't know if I oppose their development. There's no meat on here. They're attempting to use a variance in order to get a development that is properly a PUD. And in a PUD, it's a fully baked thing. So people have said, I love the massing of the buildings. I didn't see massing of buildings. I didn't see a baked plan. What I saw was articulated hardship. One, the oaks. The oaks are beautiful. They need to be there. They can't be torn down. Do they need relief from the oaks being there? The relief for trees, you guys see it all the time. The relief from trees is you don't have to comply with this setback. The building has to be set further back. So instead of X, you can place the building because of this tree. That's relief that has nexus to the hardship. What they have sought as relief, double my density. That has no nexus whatsoever to the hardships they've articulated. The Friedman's cottages are economic hardships. I saw nothing about moving them. I saw nothing that, oh, we'd like to put it here. We'd like to elevate it. We'd like to do X, Y, or Z. That might be a hardship related to those. What they said was, it's expensive. So we need more density because it's expensive. That's not an articulated hardship. Also, they are creating the condition. So abandoning the property line and making Friedman's cottages a hardship for the major lot is a condition they are creating. So what they seek to do may in fact be good for the neighborhood. But the variance process is not where you do it. And it would set a horrible precedent for you guys. And I've been coming to this board, my brother and I do developments in the city of Charleston. I've been coming to this board for almost 40 years. And I have never seen you guys grant a variance that had no nexus to the hardship that was articulated. And this has absolutely no nexus to the hardship. I asked them at the neighborhood meeting why they did not do a PUD. And they said, because I know that they did a PUD on Spring Street. So they know about PUDs. They got extra density in that PUD. And they said they didn't want to. Okay. I'm sure they don't want to be in front of this board. I'm sure everybody who deals with any city agency, I can tell you, I have not wanted to go to the TRC or come to you before you guys, or I'd love to do whatever I want. So an answer of because we don't want to, okay. Unfortunately, what they are seeking is entirely appropriate for that process. Now, that process requires it to be baked. So you have to know what's there. With regard to the fire, he did say that there was a process where you can get extra footage. It is. In his initial TRC review, they had suggested a type 5 building. Type 5 is called a combustible building. The materials blow up. Those buildings collapse in a hurry, and TRC said, no, you can't put a type 5 building. So building types, you can build on this lot. And that's an issue for the fire department. That's an issue for TRC. That's not an issue for this board. And unfortunately for them, again, they're seeking economic relief. We'd like to do this because we can possibly build cheaper buildings. That's not this board's responsibility. They can use materials. They can do masonry buildings. They can use materials that the fire department has allowed. They say the property is unique. There's a property that's a little bit larger than this that has the same conditions at the corner of Rutledge and Cannon, right behind Hominy Grill. This is not that unique. There are other properties. The fire department, we had 315 Ashley, 317 Ashley. We had 10 Orris Court in the rear of 321 Ashley. We had 179 St. Philip Street. We had 181 St. Philip Street that all had the same condition. Those properties were deep. A hose couldn't get there. We have masonry buildings. So I don't know. I hear there is a methodology where the fire department reviews, and they said that. So there is a process for that. It's not this board. This board's job is to give relief from conditions. And the conditions that you give relief from are physical conditions that occur, like the tree. But I didn't see any. I didn't see a plan that said we're going to site the building here, which is what you guys get. We saw several applications, right? The one on Spring Street, 60 Spring Street. Here's where we want to put the building. Give us relief from these setbacks because we have a narrow lot. So I didn't see that here. What I saw is somebody seeking to avoid a PUD process where something has to be fully baked, because this isn't baked. And the thing about the access, so he was asked about that at the meeting, and he said, no, we can't actually put an easement because it would mess up our financing. It's a handshake. Well, you don't get handshakes when you do a PUD. You don't get a trust me. This is going to be, the massing's going to be great. The building's going to be great. Everything's going to look great. I'm the next door neighbor. I don't know whether I may have zero objection to the actual plan that they propose, but they haven't done that yet. So I see nothing that they have asked you to do that actually addresses hardships on their property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Else here in opposition that wishes to speak? If you wish to rebut, you have an opportunity.
I don't know where to begin after that speech there, but I'll try to pick apart what he said. Obviously, there's an opportunity to do a PUD in any site. PUDs are meant for lots that don't exhibit hardships. This obviously exhibits two real hardships. The reason we're asking for this variance is to break down the massing of these houses into smaller footprints that can fit within the hose length and the tree canopies that are created, that these hardships create. I think it's an obvious example of something that meets the hardship test. I'm trying to remember what else. The cost. Oh, the cost. This is not less expensive than building one large structure that houses 14 4-bedroom units. That's insanity. That is, anyone that knows construction knows we are way better off doing what was shown on those previous slides with a large building on the northeastern corner of the site. We're happy to do that. The response to him at the neighborhood meeting was, we don't want to do a PUD simply because we don't want to do a PUD. We're happy to approach this variance and try to do something that could be better for the neighborhood, that can alleviate of the hardships that are shown on this site. And we'll do it at our expense. We're building more buildings, more exterior walls, smaller units, more kitchens, more everything, and the same number of bedrooms. Anyone that knows real estate finance, especially in multifamily, the numbers are driven by the bedrooms. We are not increasing the bedrooms. We are increasing our costs, renovating these cottages that are never going to get paid back, especially with 30-year deed-restricted workforce housing. We're building more exterior walls, breaking down the massing. This is not a financial grab. We are not increasing our density. It may be a density variance where we're getting more units, but the bedrooms are the density. That is the impact on the neighborhood. That is the impact on our finances. This request was done in an effort to alleviate us and be able to utilize the property as it would be if these hardships did not exist on the site. If these hardships weren't here, we could break down the massing and we could do 4 bedrooms across that western property line around the entire site, break down the massing as it would be at Charleston Court. We can't with what we're dealing with there. We need smaller footprints. We need the 2-bedroom sites with external stairwells in order to fit it within there. And this fire jargon he's talking about, he's wrong. We've been through that process. It is not easy to get the fire marshal to extend the 200 feet. To extend it to 16 feet, we had to increase the size of pipes by almost doubling it within the building. I know that's not something for the board to weigh in, but I think it is important that you understand there is a real hardship here. There is a part of the lot that cannot be developed based on the access. So, and furthermore, I think it's important that the board and the staff differentiate a concerned neighbor with a business competitor. Bob has tried to buy this property prior to us. He's tried to buy the property from us. At one point, he tried to buy the property from us and talked to Lee about rezoning it as hostile, and then backtracked. And when we tried to request to rezone it for short-term rental use, no, we aren't, you can't do short-term rentals here. That's either a hypocrite or a business competitor, and I think it's important for the board to see the difference. The concerned citizens are here, the ones that actually live there, not that own a hostel next door. So please take everything that was just said with a grain of salt and listen to the people that are truly concerned about the community and what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Mr. Clemmer. Are there any questions from the board for either in favor or in opposition before we close the public portion?
I have a question for Lee.
Yep.
Lee, what do you make of the 14 units, the 56 bedrooms spaced out, and there are 30 units versus having 14 units and the same number of bedrooms? Is that and did that influence your decision at all, or is that equal to you? Is this apples to apples if you have 30 units or 14 units, but the number of the bedrooms are the same, which seems to be an important talking point? Is that?
The zoning ordinance regulates the number of units.
Number of units,
And
not.
we have a rule that we don't permit new dwelling units with more than 4 bedrooms. So those are the rules. So I don't know if what he's proposing is better. It might very well be better in terms of the massing and how it's constructed on the site and how it relates to the rest of the neighborhood. But those are matters that we can't really deal with here in this setting. They would normally be dealt with through, with the PUD.
I'm just thinking too, in terms of a technicality standpoint, the zoning ordinance is very specific about dwelling units, not, our limitations are based on dwelling units, not bedrooms. So even though a dwelling unit may have some flexibility to it, that's getting more granular, I think, than what the code specifically says or allows. So I think from that standpoint, the fact that this is a request for for over double what the code permits, I think is, even if, you know, at its fullest extent, 56 bedrooms would be the grand total. I think it's very difficult to look at that number because it's completely independent, well, largely independent of the number of dwelling units.
Right.
I just have a hard time getting around that. I also I'm struggling without having a real sense of what is actually being intended to be built on this property. I know there's some diagrams in the presentation, but it still to me is not really clear. You know, how tall is that? What's the mass of that structure on the? How does that interact with the remaining adjacent buildings and everything else too? I think there's still have a lot of questions, I think, about what's being proposed.
I totally appreciate the renovation and the preservation of the Freedman's cottages and taking care of the trees. 100%. That's, to me, the most important thing. But it just seems like the density doubling is just a concern.
Have y'all started any design of the buildings?
We have, in fact, we had a design done that the neighborhood supported, and it was prior to bringing One Rosemont into the picture. That was a later development. But at that point, it had 11 units, and it was similar to the building that you saw without the variance. And it did get support, and we did break the massing down, but it was 11 4-bedroom units in there. And we never ended up taking it to the BAR because we put One Rosemont under contract and started again working with the preservation groups in the neighborhood, which pushed us into this direction. And quite honestly, there is a hardship here, and I think that this helps alleviate that, but more importantly, it provides a better situation for the neighborhood, and that's why you're hearing so much support for it tonight.
And I guess part of my challenge in this is part of the support for the community is that you're breaking it up into all these different units, but we don't see what these units are and the massing of these units. And by the way, I'm very sympathetic to your statements, but my biggest challenge is how do we rely on what these elevations may be when we haven't seen these elevations? Clearly, we don't approve design, but if part of the argument is we've got to create this breaking up of this mass, and that's kind of a hardship that you're having. It would be nice to know what that hardship is, see what it is versus a larger massed building that would maybe even keep you out of having to come here for variances on that.
And that diagram does show the footprints of where they would go. But,
I see the parking in the gray areas of what it would look like.
yeah, those are the building footprints. It's hard to go too far into design without knowing if this variance is going to be approved. But
We didn't really believe the architecture was the purview of what you'd be concerned about here.
No, it's not, but part of the hardship, I think, was that you had to go to a different type of design that did not allow the density that you would normally get in a single dwelling, multiple dwellings.
And obviously, we aren't asking for any height variances or anything like that, so it will be within the context of the current zoning code.
I'm hung up on Lee's original points. Personally. Although I'm completely sympathetic with the applicant's position.
I couldn't agree with you. I think I go back to the test, and I think the part I'm having the hardest time with is the effectively prohibiting or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. I don't believe that test is met. Does seem like for the density that's being proposed,
would be a more appropriate venue to achieve that goal. Any more, Bill?
No, I think I agree to the code would be a better mechanism and density without any kind of visualization of it. Really, it's hard to get past that.
Bill, I'll reluctantly make the motion, we not approve the variance.
Mr. Morrison moves to deny the application. Is there a second? Hearing, is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Is there another motion?
I hate to defer it for design with the thought that we might not pass it before. Like we had some design to help us understand how we would break it up. How it was
Design, we should be looking. What level of design?
I mean, most people just come in with some sort of even pre-schematic design. Something less than schematic, but my challenge is I hate to defer it, send you off to go do that and you come back and we turn it down. But it would have helped, definitely would have helped. And I just don't know a condition to put on it. If we turn it down. In cases of turning it down, really they just got to come back and show less dwellings.
They would have to change the request to come back within 6 months. But they could do that and then come back and
Just change the.
they have that option, sure.
And these units gonna go from how many to how many? How many was it?
Well, they currently have 14 dwelling units that they can put on the properties. And they want a variance to have 30 dwelling units. Total.
Same number of bedrooms, more units.
The bedrooms don't count. It's not the number of bedrooms, it's the number of dwellings.
Right, number of dwelling units is what counts.
Okay.
Bedrooms is not a variance specifically, because they're not, well, it's not a variance request,
We'd be approving doubling the units.
essentially.
With the condition of less bedrooms, though, per unit. Right? Would be a condition.
Not less bedrooms overall.
Yes.
So regardless of, so we're approving doubling the units. And we're not approving bedroom counts. That's where units.
You would direct with a condition number of bedrooms, or could we?
We just tell you that there's no specific limitation in the zoning ordinance on bedrooms. There is a limitation on the size of a family. Which limits you, not limited, if they're related people, but limited to 4 unrelated people, unrelated by blood or marriage. Yeah, so that's where we come up with 4 bedrooms, because that's what we've done.
Based on that, it sounds like we're uncomfortable with the number of units. And it sounds like you're saying they could come back. Revised plan, something that is different, not the same plan, or could they come back with the same plan?
Not,
something
not
different.
within 6 months, they can't make the same application if
Okay.
you deny it.
So they would have to change the number of dwellings. Bring it back within 6 months. Is that correct?
Right, to make a new application, it would have to be a different application than what they filed.
I think you made your motion.
The first motion failed, so if there is a new motion. Right now.
I think I'll make a motion for denial.
Okay, Mr. McKay moves to deny the application. There a second?
Second, I'll second.
Mr. Goodwin seconds the motion. All those in favor of denying the application, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? None are opposed. The variance request for Spring Street is denied by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.